So, you just started up a Warhammer 3 campaign, and you go to fight your first enemy legendary lord, and oh no, they have a tier 3 unit in there, and how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to just rush your troops in to hopefully mow it down and keep it in the slog to just have it kill itself? Or are you going to click on this video and decide that you want to take a specialized approach and use your brain and your winds of magic to help your troops outclass that loser? Alright, guys. Hi, it's me, Colonel Strat, Strategy Extraordinaire, and here I'm going to show you 3 different ways to better deal with early game or mid game tier 3 units when you have more chaffy units in your roster than before you get to the big boys. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it with tier 1 units, but normally one-on-one ratios, they're going to fail. There's nothing really you can do at that point. But the most common way that I've seen is that people just like swarm them, and that is a good tactic. But it can often just use up most of your resources in your army when you're going to need it for other units. When normally you're going to be dealing with tier 3 units in the early game, like 1 or 2 units. So I got a few strategies here that can help you defeat them a lot easier. So one of them is using wizards to like buff up your units and debuff the enemy units. A really good spell to use from the lore of metal is Plague of Rust. A lot of heavily armored units just like crumble with this one. Using even only just 1 unit plus a bunch of wizards if you have them. The Empire and the High Elves are the best ones to use this tactic with. And then there's one with the 3 units, and I only have a few wizards because usually you'll have 1 or 2. The best wizards to have is, again, Lore of Metal, Lore of Life for your side, and for the enemy side, Lore of Death, Shadows, Beasts. I'd stay away. Lore of Light can work sometimes as well, but if it's any type of melee unit, tier 3 unit, you're just going to want Death and Shadows for them, or Life and Metal for you. And then the last one is using the 1 range unit to accompany your melee unit. Now this, you'll want to use this. This is probably the best used with high elf factions because of the lore of high magic. Has a spell in it. I think it's called Hand of Glory, and it allows you to increase your reload skill for your archers, which increases their damage overall. Comparing that with Plague of Rust pretty much means you can melt any enemy tier 3 unit that comes around. So High Elves are the best in that regards for that tactic. So I'm going to show you these 3 tactics, and again, if you enjoy what I do, make sure to like the video, leave a comment down below. And tell me what you want to see in the future. I always take all suggestions, and I'm just glad to show you these tactics and make Warhammer 3 better for you guys. So let's dive in. Here we are with the first one, using 3 units. As you see, we got 3 units of spearmen here on the line. I have a Mage of Life, a Mage of Death, and a Mage of Shadows, as well as Eltharion with his Lore of High Magic. We're going up against a unit of Black Orcs and an Orc Shaman. The Orc Shaman's just kind of there because I can't really remove him in a skirmish battle. But as you see, we're going to have these 2 units pull back, and they're going to go on the side. And this unit's going to keep them busy while we're moving these guys to the sides to apply that debuff on them for gaining flank. Because like right now we see they're winning current combat, but they have faster and stronger enemies nearby. Flank's exposed. And then, we're moving our guys in, and once the flank's getting attacked, and then we have a Discourage ability, that's going to lower their morale. It's not going to be enough to rout them, because most of the tier 3 units are not going to rout immediately. You're going to have to surround them and just try to pepper them around, as well as buffing up your own units. So we hit them with the magic lores of Life, of Death, and Shadows, with the Withering from Shadows and Doom and Darkness from Death, as well as Apotheosis and healing healing from the Lore of Life on the Spearmen. That helps prolong their life while we also damage their morale. So, and then the enemy foe helps as well because it reduces their melee and melee attack and defense. So they're down to 7 and 12. So that's going to make sure they're not going to get as many hits as our guys. So you're just going to want to keep applying debuffs to them while applying some buffs to your guys to keep them in the fight. But the majority of the time, this works with just having them surround it. Make sure you cover all sides. You're doing damage to all sides, and you're going to be withering them away slowly. As you see, we're always chipping them away, little bit by little bit. They're going to get kills on you, but you have them surrounded, so you're going to outnumber them, and eventually they will get to a point where you can break them with the spell lores. Another cool thing the High Elves have is that most of their wizards come with abilities that can, buff up their winds of magic. They come with these staffs. Now these are the skirmish staffs, but you can still get them pretty easily in the campaign just through the forge mechanic, or just by getting special staffs through it. Plus, like, every elf wizard has a staff. They have a nice staff that helps power them up, and I believe they also have a right that does it too. See, now that we did this combo with the Withering and the Doom and Darkness, they're down to 11. If they get down to 0, they will start wavering and break. If it remains in 0 for I think it's 10 seconds. But, so they're now down to 5. The more morale, the more leadership they're down, the less damage they're going to do. But as long as it stays above, I think, as long as it stays above 0, they'll still keep fighting. They just won't get as many hits because it kind of gives them a little bit of a debuff. Not listed in the, it's not listed in this, but they receive a little bit more damage, and they do a little bit less damage. It's not substantial, meaning it won't turn the tide, but it does help. And of course, the biggest draw for this tactic is just having them surrounded. Again, if this is a big battlefield, there's going to be more units all over, so you don't want to commit this many units all the time unless you have, decent units to take them out. Because if you have these wizards, they might be better served helping the other army. So this tactic isn't really as favorable, but it's the most commonly used tactic, as even without the wizards, all 3 of these units will be pretty much kaput by the time they actually get this unit to rout like they are right now. So I think we're doing Doom and Darkness again, which is going to make them rout. Yep, and that's going to put them underneath 0, so they're going to start wavering, and they're routing now. They're broken. They're gone. They're done. And then we just have to deal with the Great Shaman, and that's over. So, like I showed you, this is a pretty simple tactic. You just cover them around the sides. It's basic military strategy. There's not a lot to do with it. So let's now show you a more advanced one with using a missile unit, buffing that up, and just melting them. Alright, and in this one, we have an Altharing again. But again, we only have 2 wizards. We have the Lore of Light, and we have the Lore of Metal. Why did I choose Light and Metal? Well, Metal is pretty self-explanatory, like I told you before with the Plague of Rust. And Light is pretty... It has Lore of Amantok. The Net of Amantok can really come in handy. But if you also have Files Protection, it can do wonders with keeping them alive. So they're more to buff them. So again, see, we just did Plague of Rust, and we use a special Hand of Glory to increase the reload skill. If we overcast it, it's plus 60. It buffs them up to 43 damage. Now, if the Plague of Rust is buffed up, it does 60 minus 60 armor damage. So, look at how much it's melting them. They are going down so quick now because of this. So this is a really good tactic to use. I personally, if I have this tactic, this matchup, I do it every time because it's the best way to deal with a very annoying enemy tier 3 unit that, especially if you're facing Grimgore early game, which I don't know if you would ever as the High Elves, but if say you're facing, I don't know, Black Orc Corsairs or something, you can just reduce their armor, increase their missile strength, and just outclass them. We've already pretty much routed them now. They've taken too much damage compared to us. It's just unfair sometimes. But, that's what you get for facing the High Elves with all types of magic spell lores. So now, it's kind of fallen back. We did our big push, but it's done the work. As you see, they went down to 25% health just with that one little combo. It is a very powerful combo, and I honestly recommend it against every action if you're playing High Elves or Empire. Even though the Empire doesn't have the access to the Lore of High Magic, they still can cripple the enemy's armor to a point where it's just laughable. Like, again, there we go again with another minus 30, and that again, if you go below 100 armor, they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer intensely. So we've already routed them, and we only went to half health for a tier 1 unit. That's insane. It is insanely good how good this combo is, and I honestly recommend it for all high elf players. That's another reason why they're such good. They're so good. They kick ass because of this combo. So now let's go into the last combo, which is a little bit more tricky with our wizards. Alrighty, and for this one, it's going to take a lot of explaining. So what you're going to need is a lot of mages. So to start, you get an archmage. It doesn't matter what lore she has, but she needs to have one of these 5 spell lores. She needs to have death, or heavens, or shadows, metal, or life. And then the rest of them have to be the others. Why do I choose these 5? Because they have the best bonuses. From the lore of heavens, it is harmonic convergence, which buffs up your units up to 24 added to their melee and melee attack and defense. For the shadows, it's the withering for the enemy and Okim's Mind Razor for your troops, which gives magical attacks and plus a 50% boost to both types of damage. And then the lore of metal is pretty obvious for Plague of Rust. Glittering Robe isn't really that valuable here because, for Black Orcs we have dealing with, heavy anti-armor units. So that armor is going to do nothing because, even if we get over 100, they're still going to go slice right through it with their anti-armor. But Transmutation of Lead does help a little bit, but it's not as good as Plague of Rust. So I usually just stick with that. And for the Lore of Life, I do Flesh to Stone for anything that's not a magical unit, which is, the majority of high elf enemies in the early game is going to be non-magical units. Flesh to Stone has an insane 60% physical resistance buff for about 19 seconds, and that's insane. And if you overcast it, increase its duration. So I usually overcast it, and of course, Lore of Death has the Doom and Darkness, but of course, Soul Blight could be good as well. Aspect of the Dread Knight doesn't really work as well, even though it allows you to do magical attacks. It can be good against ethereal units or any units that have a lot of physical resist, but that doesn't really come into effect for a lot of high elf enemies. And then on top of that, the cause terror and fear doesn't really affect most tier 3 units because they have immune to psychology. But the Doom and Darkness is what we're going to go for, and Spirit Leech, of course. And if you have the Purple Sun is pretty good as well. So where we start this battle at, we're buffing up our units. We give them a whole heck load of buffs. Let me just pause it here because this is an insane amount of buffs. So they have upgraded harmonic convergence, gives them 30 armor, 24 melee and melee defense and attack, and Flesh to Stone, which gives them 60% physical resist. So right now they are insane now. They're already bumped up to about the same type as a tier 3. They haven't even collided yet. And the enemy has Plague of Rust upgraded, minus 60 armor, down to 20. Leadership minus 16, leadership minus 8, and armor minus 30 by Doom and Darkness and the Withering. So that's already insane. We've casted all our spells. It takes about 30 Winds of Magic. It is an insane Winds of Magic cost. But again, if you have the right staffs equipped to your mages, you can get that power up insanely. You can get it up to where you have 30 by the time that these two collide. And then if you're not playing a legendary difficulty, you can pause it. It's a little bit more challenging in legendary difficulty because by the time they're colliding, you have to make sure that these spells are procced, or else they're going to take some damage that you don't want them to take. But like, they're colliding here, they're taking a little bit of damage, but the enemy is definitely taking more damage, and it's going to show that these debuffs are insane, and they last more than 20 seconds. So that's insane. That's a lot of time that they could be doing more damage or not receiving as much damage, and we also get bonuses from casting a spell too. If you have like, let's see, like metal shifting, you get from casting a spell with them. You get Life Bloom, which gives them a little bit heal boost, a speed boost from Smoke and Mirrors, and then you get like, I think this is a Rolling Skies to the enemy whenever she casts a spell too. This one gives, I think it's Life Leeching, right? Life Leeching, which gives you more magic power reserves. But yeah, already we've done the bit with taking the lead, but as you see, this tactic starts to wane because you're going to be spending a lot of Winds of Magic to keep these units in the fight. You will win eventually if you keep casting the right spells, but you're still going to take a lot of casualties, and this unit's going to be pretty close to dead. So it's not as good of a tactic. It's using a whole lot of magic that can be used for the rest of the battle. So the clear winner in these three tactics is going to be number 2, just because of how little magic you have to use and how much damage you can do. See, we just buffed our Winds of Magic with our spell books and our staves. You know, so now we're able to cast some more spells on the enemy, which again is Doom and Darkness, and then we casted, I believe, it was Smoke and Mirror, Metal Shifting. We got Harmonic Convergence, and then we did Withering, Plague of Rust, and Doom and Darkness again. And again, it helps a lot because it reduces their armor, their leadership, and then we buff up our melee attack and melee defense. The speed buff doesn't really apply much to us, but taking into effect that we also have physical resist from the Flesh to Stone really helps out as well. But again, these are temporary buffs, so if they don't, if they're locked into combat the entire time, you're just going to be spending a lot of Winds of Magic just to keep them alive. So you're pretty much using your wizards to breathe life into your units and keep them alive. So like we give the Mind Razor here, this is going to increase their armor piercing damage, so it's going to make them do a whole lot more to where they're going to, and again, it's just 50%, so it bases it off the unit stats. So it's not as good of a buff as you think. It does help though, but it's not going to tip the scales in our favor. We need debuffs on them to do more of our damage back to them, because we also get a buff to our non-armor piercing damage. So that one's going to be the bigger buff, So if you have Plague of Rust combined with that, you're going to be doing a lot more damage to them because they have 110 armor. So most of this damage right here is not getting through. Only 6 of it is getting through each time. So yeah, you could buff up their melee attack and defense, which means they're going to hit more. But if you don't cast Plague of Rust, they're not going to get through. Plague of Rust is probably the best way to deal with these heavily armored targets. Not every tier 3 unit is going to be heavily armored. So that's why Plague of Rust isn't, used for all of them, but the ones that are used for it, some classic damage spells can also help too, like using this one, the Mystifying Miasma. Not what I usually go for because, again, buffing the units is the best way to do it, because the unit has more entities, so if they have these buffs onto their entities, they're going to be able to do more. But by the time you see their morale shrink to this low, you're going to be able to, just take advantage of that. And then we cast Flesh to Stone, give them Life Bloom, which means they're going to get a little bit of a heal. And then, we have Doom and Darkness and the Withering. They're going to be taking a lot more damage because they're, they don't have that much armor anymore. And then, now we're starting to see the final part of the battle. Even though they have more health points than us, they're starting to, rout because we have the Withering. And it's just reducing their leadership too much. So at this point, that's when, we have to chase them down, keep them routing, and then, deal with the shaman. But like I said, this tactic is not really as viable as the second one because you're using a lot of magic. Now, I came up with these tactics myself. I haven't seen anyone else really do them. That's why I wanted to show them to you. They are a viable tactic, but again, they're not going to be. This one and the first one is not going to be as good for you in the long run. So those were my 3 tactics. So I hope you enjoyed it, and the clear winner was tactic number 2, using the archers and using the melee troops to keep them distracted while the archers are buffed up, using Plague of Rust to synergize that even more, to do more damage. It just makes the High Elves just insanely powerful. So they are the best ones to do it for, but there are ways to do it for other factions. Like I think the Dwarves can buff up their missile units as well with engineers, so they can also do pretty well. The Empire, of course, they could do pretty well as well. But the High Elves do it the best because the lore of high magic combined with the lore of metal just increases their synergy even better. So that is probably the best tactic out of these 3. But again, they all are valuable tactics, even though there are drawbacks to a couple of them. The second one is probably the best. So I advise you guys to take these tactics as you will, use them in your own strategies, your own campaigns, and I wish you the best of luck in those campaigns. And again, this is me, Colonel Strat. If ever you guys, want to tell me how I'm doing, or just leave a comment, leave a like in the video, and I'll see you around in the next one. Remember to keep it strategic, Strat fans. Colonel out.